Admiral Ben Parker stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the countdown timer reach 0. 1 hour had passed since his ultimatum to the Zilithians, and the alien station showed no signs of releasing the human children. In fact, long-range sensors indicated they had moved the kids even deeper into the facility and increased security around their location. "Admiral, all ships report ready for assault," announced Captain Kelly Roberts, his second-in-command. "Fighter squadrons are in position and our breach teams are standing by." Parker looked at the massive alien station on his screen, thinking about 12 children who had spent 3 years in cages, being studied like animals by creatures who couldn't understand what they had done. His own children were safe at home, but somewhere in that station were kids the same age as his son and daughters, trapped and terrified. "Open a final channel to the station," he ordered. Commander Vex appeared on the screen, looking noticeably less confident than he had an hour earlier. "Admiral Parker, the Zilithian Empire is prepared to negotiate. We are willing to discuss partial release of some specimens in exchange for—" "Stop," Parker interrupted. "Commander, your hour is up. You had your chance to do the right thing." "Admiral, surely you don't intend to attack a research facility over this minor dispute?" Parker's expression was carved from ice. "Minor dispute? Commander, you kidnapped 12 human children. You've spent 3 years experimenting on them, and you were planning to breed them like animals. There's nothing minor about any of that. We can reach a compromise. Perhaps 8 of the specimens in exchange for trade agreements?" "Wrong answer, Commander." Parker turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Davis, target their shield generators and communications array. Disable, don't destroy. We need those kids alive." The first volley from the human fleet was a precisely coordinated strike that lit up space around the Zilithian station. Plasma beams and particle weapons struck the station's shields with surgical accuracy, overloading the defensive systems in seconds. The communications array exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Inside the station, Commander Vex watched his defense systems fail with growing horror. "How did they penetrate our shield so quickly?" Defense Coordinator Nex looked at his instruments in shock. "Sir, their weapons technology is far more advanced than our intelligence reports indicated. They're not just overwhelming our defenses, they're completely outclassing them." The second wave of the human assault was even more devastating. 6 smaller human ships broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward the station at impossible speeds, their hulls glowing with energy shields that deflected the station's return fire as if it were rain. "Breach teams are away," Captain Roberts reported. "They'll reach the station in 4 minutes." Parker watched the tactical display as his ships moved with deadly precision around the alien facility. Every shot was calculated, every movement planned, to minimize damage to the areas where the children were being held, while systematically dismantling the station's ability to resist. "Admiral," Communications Officer Lieutenant Amy Chen called out, "I'm receiving a surrender signal from the station." "Too late," Parker replied coldly. "They had their chance to surrender. Now we do this the hard way." The human breach teams hit the station like a force of nature. 24 Marines in powered armor cut through the hull and swept into the facility, their weapons and equipment centuries ahead of anything the Zilithians possessed. Station security forces that tried to resist were stunned unconscious in seconds by non-lethal weapons. Commander Vex watched helplessly as his station was systematically conquered by human forces moving with unstoppable efficiency. "This is impossible. How can a primitive species possess such advanced military technology?" Analysis leader Keth had been studying the human assault patterns. "Commander, I don't think they're primitive at all. I think we've been completely wrong about their technological level. But our intelligence reports were based on outdated information and massive underestimation of human capabilities," Keth interrupted. "Sir, the humans have been deliberately concealing their true military strength." On the human command ship, Parker received regular updates from the assault teams. "Breach Team Alpha has secured Section C7. They've found the children." "What's their condition?" "Alive but traumatized, sir. The kids have been kept in individual cells with minimal contact with each other. They're scared and confused, but physically unharmed." Parker felt a weight lift from his shoulders. After 3 years, the missing children from the New Denver colony were finally safe. Get them to Medical Bay 1 immediately. Full psychological support team standing by. As the human forces systematically took control of the Zilithian station, the scope of what they found became clear. The facility wasn't just holding the 12 human children, it contained over 300 sentient beings from dozens of different species, all being held as research specimens. Admiral, Captain Roberts reported, our teams are finding evidence of extensive experimentation on multiple species. This isn't just a research facility. It's a collection center for intelligent life forms. Parker's jaw tightened. Free them all. Every single prisoner gets medical attention and transportation home. Commander Vex found himself under guard in his own control center, watching human soldiers efficiently shut down his life's work. Admiral Parker, what you're doing is an act of war against the Zilithian Empire. Parker appeared on the station's communication system, his image filling every screen in the facility. Commander, let me explain something to you. What you call research, we call torture. What you call specimens, we call people. What you call scientific advancement, we call kidnapping and imprisonment. Your species cannot comprehend the value of our scientific research. You're right, Commander. We can't comprehend how any intelligent species could look at children and see laboratory animals. We can't understand how you could cage sentient beings and call it science. Vex watched as human medical teams carefully carried the 12 human children to waiting transport ships. The kids looked small and fragile after 3 years of captivity, but they were alive and finally going home. Admiral, the galactic community will not tolerate this aggression. Parker's smile was sharp and cold. Commander, we're not aggressors, we're liberators. And as for the galactic community, let me make something very clear. The Admiral's expression became deadly serious. This message is being broadcast on all frequencies to every species in this sector. Humanity is officially announcing our presence on the galactic stage, and we're delivering our first and most important message. Parker looked directly into the camera. To any species listening to this transmission, human children are not specimens. Human beings are not research subjects. If any species anywhere ever again decides to cage human children for study or experimentation, we will find you. We will free our people. And we will make sure you never threaten anyone else again. Commander Vex felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. Admiral, you cannot threaten entire civilizations over our children? Commander, that's exactly what we're doing. You thought you were dealing with a primitive species that would write off a few lost colonists. Instead, you discovered that humans will cross the galaxy to protect a single child. The human admiral's voice carried absolute conviction. Let this be a lesson to every species in the galaxy. Humans protect their own. We protect our children above all else. And if you threaten our kids, you'll discover that there is no force in the universe more dangerous than human parents who know their children are in danger. As the last of the rescued prisoners were loaded onto human ships, Parker delivered his final message to the Zilithian station. Commander Vex, you and your people are being transported to the nearest Galactic Council facility to face charges of kidnapping, illegal imprisonment, and crimes against sentient beings. Your research, notes and data files are being transmitted to every major civilization as evidence of what you've done. The Zilithian Empire will never accept... The Zilithian Empire will accept whatever we decide, Parker interrupted. Because you made one critical mistake, Commander. You thought we were primitive animals reacting on instinct. In reality, we're an advanced technological civilization with the industrial capacity to build fleets like this one whenever we need to. Vex stared at the human admiral with growing horror. Your entire species was pretending to be less advanced than you really are? Not pretending, Commander. We just didn't see any reason to show off our military capabilities until someone gave us a reason to use them. You gave us that reason when you caged our children. The human fleet began withdrawing from the system, carrying with them over 300 liberated prisoners and a clear message that had been broadcast across the galaxy. Commander Vex watched them go, finally understanding the magnitude of his species' mistake. They hadn't captured specimens from a primitive culture. They had kidnapped the children of a technologically advanced civilization that considered harm to children the ultimate unforgivable crime. The Zilithians had learned too late that there are some lines that should never be crossed. As the last human ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying 12 children home to families who had never stopped hoping, Jake Morrison stood in the center of the bridge, watching the Zilithian station grow larger on the main screen as they approached. His crew had spent the last 4 hours preparing for what might be the most dangerous mission of their lives. Weapons were charged, shields were at maximum, and everyone knew their role in the rescue operation. But before they resorted to violence, Jake wanted to try one final approach. Maybe, just maybe, he could make the aliens understand what they had done and convince them to release the children peacefully. "Open a channel to Commander Vex," he ordered. The alien's cold face appeared on the screen, showing clear annoyance. "Human vessel, you continue to ignore direct orders to leave this system. This behavior will be reported to the Galactic Council as evidence of your species' primitive aggression." Jake took a deep breath and tried to keep his voice steady. "Commander, before this situation gets out of hand, I want to give you one last chance to understand what you've done. You say you've studied humans for 3 years, but you've completely missed the most important thing about our species." Vex's large black eyes showed mild interest. "Elaborate." "Those children you're holding aren't just specimens or research subjects. In human society, children are sacred. They represent our future, our hope, our most precious treasure. When you took those kids from that colony ship, you didn't just capture 12 individuals. You declared war on every human in the galaxy." The alien tilted his head in what might have been confusion. "Your emotional attachment to offspring is already documented in our files. Many species show protective behaviors toward their young. This is basic evolutionary programming." Lisa stepped forward. "It's more than just evolutionary programming. Human children are individuals with rights, dreams, and infinite potential. They're not property to be collected or studied." Vex looked at her with what could only be described as condescending amusement. "Dr. Grant, your primitive concepts of individual value are touching but scientifically irrelevant. Your species produces offspring in large numbers specifically, because most will not survive to reproductive age. The loss of a few juveniles is statistically meaningless." Tony couldn't contain himself any longer. "You sick bastard. You're talking about kids like they're numbers in a database." "Security. Chief Martinez, your aggressive posturing only confirms our research data about human territorial behavior. Your species reacts to stress with violence because you lack the intellectual capacity for rational problem solving." Jake felt his patience finally snap. "Commander, let me make something very clear to you. If you don't release those children immediately, you're going to learn exactly how rational human problem-solving can be." Vex actually seemed amused by this. "Captain Morrison, are you threatening military action against a sovereign Zilithian facility? Your single ship against our heavily defended station? This would be suicidal even for a species as impulsive as yours." Amy had been monitoring alien communications during the conversation. "Captain, they're moving the children to a deeper level of the station. Heavy security protocols are being activated." Jake's jaw tightened. "Commander, you're making a mistake. Those children have families, friends, entire communities who love them and want them back. When word spreads about what you've done, when other humans learn that you've been torturing human children for 3 years, there won't be a safe place in the galaxy for your species. Captain, your melodramatic threats are being recorded for our behavioral database. The concept that a primitive species would threaten an advanced galactic empire over a few specimens shows exactly why your kind needs to be studied and contained." Lisa tried a different approach. "Commander, let me ask you something. Do your people have children?" The Zilithian reproductive cycle produces offspring at predictable intervals based on resource availability and imperial population requirements. "That's not what I asked. Do you have children? Young ones that you care about?" Vex seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "Zilithian juveniles are raised in communal education facilities by trained specialists. Individual attachment to specific offspring is considered a primitive emotional dysfunction. Jake realized with growing horror that they were dealing with a species that literally couldn't understand the concept of loving your own children. The Zilithians saw family bonds as mental illness and parental love as primitive behavior. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "You can't understand. To humans, children aren't just the next generation, they're everything. A human parent would die before letting harm come to their child. A human community would go to war to protect its children. And when you took those kids, you didn't just hurt them. You hurt every human who will ever hear about what you did." Vex's expression remained coldly analytical. "Your species' irrational attachment to individual offspring is precisely why you remain classified as primitives. Advanced civilizations understand that the collective is more important than any individual unit." Amy looked up from her console with alarm. "Captain, I'm picking up new signals from deep inside the station. It looks like they're preparing to transfer the children to some kind of medical facility." "Medical experiments?" Tony asked, his hand moving toward the weapon controls. "Unknown, sir, but the bio readings show the children are in severe distress. Heart rates are elevated. Stress hormones are through the roof." Jake felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. "Commander Vex, what medical procedures are you planning to perform on those children?" "Standard physiological research. We need baseline data on human reproductive development before beginning the breeding program." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "Breeding program?" "Yes. Once the specimens reach sexual maturity, we will begin controlled reproduction studies. The data on human child-rearing behaviors will be invaluable for our research." Lisa's face went white. "You're planning to force those children to have babies so you can study them? Dr. Grant, your emotional response is noted. The specimens will be well cared for during the reproductive phase of our research." Jake couldn't speak for a moment. The aliens weren't just keeping human children as prisoners. They were planning to use them as breeding stock, to force them to produce babies that would also become research subjects in this nightmare facility. "Commander," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "you have exactly 1 hour to release those children. After that, I'm coming to get them myself." Vex actually laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Captain Morrison, your ship carries a crew of 4 against our station's complement of 300. Our shields can withstand capital ship bombardment. Your primitive weapons pose no threat to us." "You're wrong about that," Jake said. "And you're wrong about something else too. Those aren't just my weapons you're facing. Every human weapon in this sector will be pointed at you soon enough." "Impossible. Our intelligence reports indicate no major human military presence in this region." Amy looked up from her communications station. "Captain, our message to Earth Command has been received. I'm getting confirmation codes from the Admiralty." Jake smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Commander, that message we sent to Earth wasn't just a routine report. It was notification that the missing New Denver colonists have been found, and that they're being held prisoner and tortured by aliens who plan to use them for breeding experiments." For the first time, Vex looked uncertain. "Your government will not risk war over a few specimens." "You still don't get it," Jake said. "This isn't about government policy or military strategy. This is about human children being held in cages by monsters who see them as animals. When the rest of humanity learns what you've done, when they hear about your breeding programs and your medical experiments, they won't be thinking about diplomatic solutions." Lisa nodded grimly. "Commander, humans have a saying, 'Hell hath no fury like a protective parent.' You're about to learn what that means on a species-wide scale." Tony was monitoring their sensors. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships jumping into the outer system. Long-range sensors show at least 50 vessels incoming." Vex's confidence finally began to crack. 50 ships? That's impossible. No species commit such resources to recover a handful of specimens. "Commander," Jake said softly, "you kidnapped human children. You caged them, experimented on them, and planned to breed them like animals. Did you really think we'd send a strongly worded diplomatic note?" Amy's console was lighting up with incoming signals. "Captain, I'm receiving transmissions from the incoming fleet. Admiral Ben Parker is commanding aboard the dreadnought Vengeance. They're requesting immediate status updates and are asking for our exact location relative to the hostages. Jake turned back to Vex. Admiral Parker has 3 children of his own, Commander. Twin daughters and a son, all around the same age as the kids you're holding. How do you think he's going to react when he hears about your research program? Vex was clearly shaken now. This response is completely disproportionate. The specimens represent minimal value to your species' overall population. That's where you're wrong, Jake said. Those children represent everything to us. Every single one of them is someone's son or daughter, brother or sister. They have names, personalities, dreams for the future. They're not specimens or research subjects. They're human beings, and we're coming to take them home. The Zilithian station's long-range sensors had never recorded anything like what was approaching their system. Commander Vex stood in the station's control center, staring at readings that seemed impossible. What had started as 50 human ships had grown to over 200 vessels of every size and class, from massive dreadnoughts to small escort fighters. Analysis Section Leader Keth Gamma 2, explain these readings, Vex demanded, his voice showing the first signs of real concern. The junior Zilithian scientist studied the sensor data with growing confusion. Commander, the human response fleet includes vessels from at least 12 different human colonies and military districts. Many of these ships appear to have been diverted from other missions and are operating at maximum speed toward our position. Vex felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of service: uncertainty. This makes no sense. No rational species would commit such massive resources to recover 12 specimens. Station Defense Coordinator Nex Alpha 7 looked up from his tactical display with obvious worry. Commander, the lead human vessel is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding immediate communication with station leadership. Put them through, Vex ordered, though he was beginning to suspect that the situation had moved far beyond his ability to control. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human warship that dwarfed anything in the Zilithian fleet. A human male in military uniform stood in the center, and Vex immediately noticed something different about this one. Where Captain Morrison had shown anger and frustration, this human radiated cold, controlled fury that was far more frightening. I am Admiral Ben Parker of the Human Colonial Defense Force, commanding the fleet response to the Kepler 442 incident, the human said, his voice carrying absolute authority. I am speaking to the individual responsible for holding human children prisoner. Vex tried to maintain his official composure. Admiral Parker, I am Station Commander Vex Theta 9. Your fleet's presence in Zilithian space constitutes an act of aggression that will be reported to the Galactic Council. Admiral Parker's expression didn't change. Commander, you are holding 12 human children who were kidnapped from a civilian vessel 3 years ago. You will release them immediately. Admiral, the specimens in question are part of an ongoing scientific research program approved by Imperial Decree. We are not required to— Stop, Parker interrupted, his voice cutting through Vex's explanation like a blade. I want to be very clear about something, Commander. I have 3 children of my own. My daughters Emma and Sophie are 14 and 12 years old. My son Danny just turned 10 last month. Vex looked confused. Admiral, your personal reproductive history is irrelevant to this discussion. No, Commander, it's the most relevant thing in the universe right now, because when I think about those kids you're holding, I think about my own children locked in cages, being experimented on by aliens who see them as animals. The human admiral moved closer to the screen, and Vex could see something dangerous in his eyes. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what those children mean to us? Vex tried to regain control of the conversation. Admiral, your emotional attachment to individual offspring is noted in our research files. However, your current military response is completely disproportionate to the actual value of— Value? Parker's voice rose for the first time. Commander, each of those children is worth more than your entire station. They're worth more than your entire species if it comes to that. Analysis Section. Leader Keth looked at his readings with growing alarm. Commander, I'm detecting weapon signatures on every human vessel. They're all combat-ready and targeting our station. Vex felt his confidence crumbling. Admiral, surely we can reach a reasonable compromise. The Zilithian Empire would be willing to negotiate a trade agreement, perhaps some of the specimens in exchange for advanced human technology. Admiral Parker was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. Commander, let me tell you about the ship I'm commanding. The Vengeance is a Titan-class dreadnought with enough firepower to crack a planet. The rest of my fleet includes 47 other capital ships, 63 cruisers, and over 100 smaller vessels. Admiral, your fleet is impressive, but our station's defenses are irrelevant, Parker finished. Because we didn't come here to negotiate, Commander. We came here to collect our children. The only question is whether you hand them over peacefully, or whether we take them from the wreckage of your station. Vex looked at his tactical displays, seeing the massive human fleet arrayed against his single station. Admiral, you cannot be serious about attacking a sovereign Zilithian facility over a few specimens. Wrong word, Commander. They're not specimens, they're children. Human children with names and families and futures that you've stolen from them. Communications Officer Rex Beta 4 looked up from his station with panic in his voice. Commander, I'm monitoring human fleet communications. They're not just military vessels. Many of these ships are civilian transports and merchant vessels that have been armed and pressed into service. Admiral Parker nodded grimly. That's right, Commander. When word spread about what you'd done to our children, humans came from all over this sector to help get them back. Merchant captains, transport pilots, mining crews, anyone with a ship that could carry weapons. Vex stared at the human admiral, trying to process this information. You're telling me that civilian humans abandoned their normal activities to join a military operation? I'm telling you that when humans hear about children being caged and tortured, nothing else matters. Work stops, normal life stops, everything stops until those children are safe. Defense Coordinator Nex was studying the human fleet formation with growing horror. Commander, their tactical arrangement isn't designed for conquest or territorial seizure. It's specifically optimized for rescue operations. They really did come here just for the specimens. For the children, Parker corrected sharply. And yes, that's exactly what we came for. We came for 12 kids who should be safe, at home with their families instead of locked in your laboratory. Vex tried one more diplomatic approach. Admiral Parker, the specimens, the children, have been well cared for during their time at our facility. Our research has been conducted according to the highest scientific standards. Commander, I've read Captain Morrison's report about your research methods, psychological stress testing, social isolation experiments, breeding program preparations. You call that well cared for? The research protocols are designed to gather valuable behavioral data while maintaining specimen health. Admiral Parker's expression hardened further. Specimen health. Commander, do you know what one of those children told Captain Morrison? When he managed to communicate with them briefly, a 10-year-old boy named Kevin said he just wants to go home to his mom and dad. Emotional responses are expected in juvenile subjects removed from familiar pack structures. Pack structures, Parker repeated slowly. Commander, that 10-year-old boy doesn't belong to a pack. He belongs to a family. Parents who have spent 3 years wondering if their child is alive or dead. Grandparents who may never see him again. A little sister who asks every day when her big brother is coming home. Vex was beginning to realize that the human concept of individual attachment was far stronger than Zilithian research had indicated. Admiral, perhaps we underestimated the emotional significance of these particular individuals to your species. You think? Parker's voice dripped with sarcasm. Commander, let me make this simple for you. Those 12 children are the most important thing in the universe to the 200 ships surrounding your station. More important than military objectives. More important than diplomatic relations. More important than anything else. Tactical Officer Zex Delta 8 reported with growing urgency. Commander, the human ships are moving into assault formation. They'll be within optimal firing range in 18 minutes. Admiral Parker looked directly at Vex through the screen. Commander, I'm going to give you one chance to do the right thing. Release those children to us immediately and we'll leave your station intact. Refuse and we'll take them anyway, but you won't like how we do it. Admiral, this is madness. Starting a war over 12 individuals? Commander, we're not starting a war. You started it 3 years ago when you decided human children were interesting specimens to collect. We're just finishing it. The communication channel went silent, leaving the Zilithian control center in shocked quiet. Vex looked around at his staff, seeing fear in their eyes for the first time in his career. None of them had ever encountered a species that would mobilize such massive resources for such a small number of individuals. Analysis leader. Keth, in your professional opinion, are the humans bluffing? Keth studied his instruments carefully before answering. Commander, based on their fleet composition, tactical positioning, and communication patterns, I believe they are fully prepared to assault this station. Their entire formation is optimized for rapid penetration and extraction operations. Defense Coordinator Nex added his own grim assessment. Sir, our defensive systems could probably hold against a normal attack, but this fleet has enough firepower to overwhelm us completely. Jake Morrison paced back and forth on the bridge while his crew worked frantically at their stations. 2 hours had passed since their first contact with the Zilithians, and every minute that went by meant those children remained trapped in alien hands. He had tried to contact the station 3 more times, but Commander Vex refused to even discuss releasing the human prisoners. Lisa looked up from her science station with new information. Captain, I've completed detailed scans of the facility. The human children are being kept in Section C7, about 12 levels down from the main docking bay. The area is heavily monitored with sensors and cameras, but the physical barriers don't look too strong. Amy turned from her communications console with worry on her face. Sir, I've been monitoring their internal communications. The Zilithians are discussing moving the children to a more secure location. They're also talking about increasing security around the station. Tony checked his weapon systems again. We could punch through their shields if we had to, but that station is massive. It would take us hours to fight our way to where the kids are being held, and they'd probably move them before we got there. Jake stopped pacing and looked at the alien station on the main screen. Somewhere inside that structure, 12 human children were living in cages, being studied like animals by creatures who didn't even understand they were dealing with intelligent beings. The thought made his blood boil, but he forced himself to think clearly. Open a channel to the station again, he ordered. Let's try one more time to make them understand. The screen flickered and Commander Vex appeared again, looking annoyed. Human vessel, you were ordered to leave this system. Why do you remain? Jake stepped forward, trying to keep his voice calm and reasonable. Commander, I want to discuss the human children you're holding. You say they're specimens, but I need you to understand something important. Humans are an intelligent species, just like you. Those children have families who love them and miss them. Vex's large black eyes showed no emotion. Your claim is noted but irrelevant. All species consider themselves intelligent. Our scientists have thoroughly studied your specimens and determined that while humans show some capacity for learning, you remain fundamentally primitive and driven by basic instincts. Lisa moved up beside Jake. That's not true. Humans have developed space travel, mathematics, science, art, literature. We've built civilizations across dozens of worlds. Learned behaviors and mimicry, Vex replied dismissively. Many lower species can be trained to perform complex tasks. Your species shows pack behavior and basic tool use, but our research indicates you lack true sapience. Jake felt his anger rising. Commander, let me speak directly to those children. Let them talk to us. You'll see that they're not animals or specimens. Unnecessary. We have 3 years of behavioral data. The specimens show typical patterns for an aggressive territorial species. They form social bonds within their group and demonstrate distress when separated, but this is common among pack animals. Amy had been listening to more of the alien communications. Captain, they've been running experiments on the children. Psychological tests, social isolation studies, stress response measurements. They're treating them like lab rats. The cold fury in Jake's chest grew stronger. What kind of experiments? Vex seemed happy to explain. Standard behavioral research. We separate individuals from the group to study pack hierarchy. We introduce stressful stimuli to measure defensive responses. We limit resources to observe competitive behaviors. The data has been quite valuable for understanding primitive social structures. Tony's hand was gripping his console so tightly that his knuckles were white. They're torturing kids and calling it science. Jake tried one more approach. Commander, in human society, children are not just young members of our species. They're individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, hopes, and dreams. They have families who are desperately searching for them. What you're doing is causing immense suffering to both the children and their loved ones. Vex looked genuinely puzzled. Your emotional attachment to offspring is noted in our files. However, your species reproduces quickly and in large numbers. The loss of a few juveniles should not significantly impact your population. It's not about population numbers, Lisa said, her voice shaking with emotion. It's about the fact that each of those children is a unique individual. They have names, personalities, relationships. They're not replaceable. This anthropomorphic thinking is exactly what we expect from a primitive species, Vex replied. You assign individual significance to what are simply biological units designed for species continuation. Jake had heard enough. Let me make this very clear, Commander. Those children are human citizens, and I'm demanding their immediate release. If you don't comply, you'll be in violation of interstellar law and human territorial rights. Vex's expression didn't change. Your threats are meaningless. This system is under Zilithian jurisdiction and our research is protected by Imperial decree. The specimens will remain in our facility. The communication ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Jake stared at the blank screen, processing what he had just heard. The aliens weren't just keeping human children prisoner. They were conducting psychological experiments on them, treating them like animals, and saw absolutely nothing wrong with it. Amy broke the silence. Captain, I'm getting more intercepts of their internal communications. They're planning to start what they call reproductive studies once the older children reach full maturity. Jake's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Lisa's face was pale as she looked at her readings. Based on their biological files, I think they're planning to breed the children when they're old enough. They want to study human reproduction and child-rearing behaviors. Tony stood up from his station, his face dark with rage. Over my dead body. Jake felt something shift inside him. The diplomatic approach wasn't working. The Zilithians didn't see humans as people. They saw them as animals to be studied and experimented on. No amount of explaining or reasoning was going to change their minds. Amy, what's the status on our message to Earth Command? Sent 3 hours ago, sir. At this distance, it'll take another 20 hours for the signal to reach Earth and then at least 2 weeks for any ships to get here. Those kids don't have 2 weeks, Jake said grimly. Not if these aliens are planning to start breeding experiments. Lisa was still scanning the station. Captain, I'm reading more details about their facility. They have over 200 different species locked up in there. Some of the bio readings suggest they've been held for decades. It's not just a research station, Tony realized. It's a collection. They're collecting intelligent species like trophies. Jake looked at his crew. 3 people against an entire alien station, trying to save 12 children from creatures who saw them as nothing more than interesting animals to study and experiment on. The odds were impossible, but the alternative was unacceptable. Here's what we're going to do, he said slowly. We're going to dock with that station and demand access to the human prisoners. When they refuse, we're going to take those children by force. Sir, that's essentially an act of war, Lisa pointed out. We could start an interstellar conflict. Jake thought about 12 human children who had been caged for 3 years, subjected to psychological torture by aliens who couldn't understand that they were dealing with thinking, feeling people. He thought about the Zilithians' plans for breeding experiments and their casual dismissal of human suffering. They started this war the moment they decided to cage human children, he said quietly. We're just going to finish it. Amy looked nervous. Captain, what if Earth Command doesn't approve of our actions? Jake turned to look at the alien station one more time. Then I'll face the consequences. But I'm not leaving those kids in alien hands for another day. Tony was already running combat diagnostics on their weapons. What's the plan, sir? We go in fast and hard, hit their shield generators, disable their communications, and punch a hole straight to Section C7. We grab the kids and get out before they can mount an effective response. Lisa shook her head. Captain, this is incredibly dangerous. We don't know what kind of defenses they have or how they'll react to a direct assault. I know, Jake admitted. But sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. Those are human children in there, and every moment we delay means more suffering for them. The bridge fell silent as his crew considered the implications of what he was proposing. They were about to attack an alien facility and rescue human prisoners, potentially starting a war between species. It was exactly the kind of situation that first contact protocols were designed to prevent. But as Jake looked at each of his crew members, he saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. They were humans, and human children were in danger. Everything else was secondary to that simple fact. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Defiant, watching the stars drift past through the main viewing screen. His crew had been out here for 3 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of life or useful resources. It was routine work, but Jake never got tired of seeing new worlds and strange sights that no human had ever seen before. The ship was quiet, except for the low hum of the engines and the soft beeping of various instruments. Chief Science Officer Lisa Grant was at her station, studying readings from the latest planet they had scanned. Security Chief Tony Martinez was checking weapon systems, though they rarely needed them on these peaceful missions. Communications. Specialist Amy Johnson sat at her post, monitoring for any signals from other ships or alien civilizations. Everything changed when Amy's console started making loud warning sounds. She looked at her screen with confusion, then excitement. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal," she said, her voice rising with interest. "It's coming from the Kepler 442 system, about 6 light hours from here." Jake moved to her station and looked at the data streaming across her screen. The signal was weak but definitely artificial. Someone or something was calling for help. "Can you tell what kind of signal it is?" he asked. Amy worked at her controls, trying to clean up the transmission. "It's not human, sir. The pattern is completely different from anything in our databases, but it's definitely a distress call. The mathematics are universal." Lisa looked up from her station with bright eyes. "Captain, we should investigate. First contact protocols require us to respond to distress signals from unknown species." Tony frowned and crossed his arms. "Could be a trap. Pirates sometimes use fake distress signals to lure ships into ambushes." Jake thought about it for a moment. They were far from human space, and backup would be days away if they ran into trouble. But they had signed up to explore and make contact with new civilizations. "Set course for the signal's origin," he decided. "But keep shields ready and weapons on standby." The journey to Kepler 442 took 8 hours at maximum speed. As they got closer, their sensors began picking up more details about what was waiting for them. There was a large artificial structure orbiting one of the system's moons, clearly not human in design. It looked like a massive station with strange curved sections and towers that made no sense to human eyes. "I'm reading multiple life signs aboard that station," Lisa reported as they approached. "Definitely not human. The biosignatures are completely alien." Amy was still working on the distress signal. "The transmission is getting stronger. It's coming from the station itself, but I'm also picking up other signals. Some kind of automated systems, maybe." Jake studied the alien station through the viewing screen. It was huge, easily 10 times the size of any human space station he had ever seen. Strange lights blinked along its surface in patterns that made no sense to him. "Any signs of weapons or defenses?" he asked Tony. Tony checked his instruments carefully. Some kind of energy barriers around the station. Could be shields or just protective fields. "I'm not detecting any obvious weapon systems, but with alien technology, who knows what we're looking at." As they moved closer, Amy suddenly sat up straight in her chair. "Captain, I'm picking up something else. There are multiple distress signals coming from inside the station. Different types, different sources. Multiple ships in trouble," Jake wondered. "No, sir, that's not it." Amy's voice became worried. "These signals are biological. Individual life forms calling for help. Lisa quickly ran new scans of the station. She's right, Captain. I'm reading dozens of different species inside that structure, many of them showing signs of extreme stress. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Are you saying that station is some kind of prison? Before anyone could answer, a new signal came through their communication system. This one was strong and clear, obviously directed at their ship. Amy put it on the main speakers and an alien voice filled the bridge. The words were in an unknown language, but the translation computer quickly began working on it. Unknown vessel, you are approaching a restricted Zilithian preservation facility. State your species and purpose immediately or face detention. Jake looked at his crew. None of them had ever heard of the Zilithians before. Amy, open a channel. Let's see what these aliens want. The main screen flickered and showed the image of an alien creature. It had gray skin, large black eyes, and a thin build that reminded Jake of old science fiction movies. The alien wore some kind of official uniform with symbols that meant nothing to humans. I am Station Commander Vex Theta 9 of the Zilithian Empire, the alien said in a flat, emotionless voice. You are trespassing in protected space. Identify yourselves and state your business. Jake stepped forward. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration vessel Defiant. We received distress signals from your station and came to offer assistance. The alien's large eyes seemed to study Jake with cold interest. Humans. We have specimens of your species in our collection. You are not authorized to be in this system. Leave immediately. The word specimens hit Jake like a physical blow. What did you say about specimens? Commander Vex tilted his head as if confused by the question. We maintain a preservation facility for rare and interesting species encountered throughout the galaxy. Several members of your species are currently housed in our research section. Lisa stepped up beside Jake, her face pale. You're talking about human beings, living people? Correct. 12 juvenile examples of your species, acquired 3 of your years ago from a damaged vessel. They provide excellent research data on primitive social behaviors. Tony's hand moved toward his weapon controls, but Jake held up a hand to stop him. These specimens you're talking about, are they children? If by children you mean immature members of your species, then yes. They are most useful for studying development patterns in aggressive primitive cultures. Jake felt rage building inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Commander, those are human children. They're not specimens or research subjects. They're people, and if you took them from a ship, you kidnapped them. The alien looked genuinely puzzled. Your emotional response is noted and will be added to our behavioral database. The specimens are well cared for and serve an important scientific purpose. They are in no danger. Amy was frantically working at her station, trying to scan deeper into the alien station. Captain, I'm detecting human life signs in the lower sections. 12 individuals, all showing signs of stress and confinement. Jake's voice became deadly serious. Commander Vex, I'm ordering you to release those human children immediately. What you're doing is kidnapping and imprisonment. You're primitive. Concepts of ownership do not apply to scientific preservation. The specimens will remain in our facility for continued study. Your vessel will leave this system immediately or be detained as well. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Defiant in shocked silence. Jake stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to process what he had just heard. Somewhere in that alien station, 12 human children were being held, prisoner and treated like laboratory animals. Lisa was the first to speak. Captain, we have to do something. Those are kids. Tony nodded grimly. Human children. Being kept like pets by these aliens. Amy looked up from her console with fear in her eyes. Sir, I'm reading more details about the station now. It's not just a research facility. It's a zoo. They have hundreds of different species locked up in there. Jake felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. 3 years ago, a colony ship had gone missing in this sector. Everyone assumed it had been destroyed in an accident. But now they knew the truth. The Zilithians had taken survivors, and those survivors were children who had been living in captivity for 3 years. Amy, send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them we've found the missing colonists from the New Denver expedition. Tell them the situation and request immediate backup. Jake's voice was steady, but his crew could hear the anger underneath. Lisa, I want detailed scans of that station. Find out exactly where those children are being kept and what kind of security we're dealing with. What about the aliens? Tony asked. They said they'd detain us if we don't leave. Jake looked at the alien station on the screen, thinking about 12 human children who had been prisoners for 3 years, treated like animals by creatures who couldn't understand that they were dealing with thinking, feeling people. Let them try, he said quietly.